Hey guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. My name's Amanda, and today I want to share with you the 11 books that I read in the month of June. Okay, so like I said, I read 11 books in the month of June. It was a fantastic reading month for me. I read a lot of really great books, and I'm really excited to share them with you today. So I'm just going to jump into this. I'm going to go in order of that I read in the order that I read the books. Wow, that was hard. And let's just get into it. So, the first book that I want to share with you today is Lease on Love by Fallon Ballard. This is a contemporary romance that has gotten quite a lot of hype on Bookstagram, especially. A lot of people have really loved this book. I was coming off of like a contemporary romance binge at the end of May, and so this was one of the books that I knew that I wanted to read because it had received so much praise. And unfortunately, this one didn't live up to the hype for me. The premise of this book is that our main character, Sadie, has recently been passed over for a promotion and lost her job. And so she's really down in the dumps. And one night, in a drunken stupor, she mistakes a roommate finding app for a dating app. And she thinks she's looking for a date. In reality, she ends up on the doorstep of Jack, who is looking for a roommate, not a date. So she ends up becoming roommates with Jack, and in the process, a romance ensues. Jack has a lot of secrets and a lot of things that he is trying to work through himself, and so that definitely adds to the story. So initially, Jack and Sadie are not attracted to each other, so they are platonic roommates, and then, things kind of go from there. But there was a lot of wit and banter. One of the things that I was not a fan of for this book is that it really leaned heavily on drinking and being drunk as a way of escapism, and I didn't love that. I'm not opposed to drinking, I drink alcohol. However, the amount that it was leaned on in this book was not a favorite of mine, I'll say. In addition to that, I just felt like a lot of the plot points were very convenient, and it just seemed very unrealistic to me, which for me in contemporary books specifically is a pet peeve of mine. So for some people, that doesn't bother them at all, and that's totally fine. But those are just a couple of things that didn't work for me specifically in this book. And so I wanted to point those out. But overall, it was a cute romance. I really enjoyed Sadie's wit and humor and sarcasticness, snarkiness almost, especially in the first chapter of the book. I was cracking up. It was really funny. And I really did appreciate Jack and his empathy and his willingness to be supportive. And that was something that I really appreciated from his character. But yeah, overall, this one was just a 3-star for me. The next book that I read is The Wedding Season by Katie Birchall. This one is another contemporary romance, but this one I loved. This one follows Freya, who when the book opens up, it's the day before her wedding. She is getting ready to get married. Her and her friends are all preparing for it, and then her fiance leaves her at the altar, or breaks up with her the day before the wedding. She doesn't make it quite to the altar, but breaks up with her the day before the wedding. And she is devastated. She didn't see this coming. She is completely heartbroken. And so her wedding was supposed to take place in May, and then over the course of the summer into the early fall, she was supposed to attend 8 other weddings, and now she is completely heartbroken and doesn't want to attend these weddings, some of them being weddings of friends of the couple. And so she knows that her ex-fiance is going to be there, and she doesn't want to see him, and she's so devastated. And so her friends decide to put together a list of challenges to get her through the wedding season. And so she has to complete a challenge at each wedding, and it's something for her to focus on that distracts her from her heartbreak and focusing on her ex too much. And so it was so funny. It was so much fun. I found the relatability of being recently broken up with, being recently dumped, that feeling, the grief that goes with that, the anger that can go with that. I found that to be very relatable. In addition, she does encounter a new love interest throughout the book, and I felt like that relationship was very realistic, the way that it evolved. If you can't tell, realistic contemporary is something that I really prefer. And so that was important to me. And then, in addition to this, this is a clean romance. There is no sex anything in this, and so I really appreciated that as well. It was very refreshing. And so this, for me, like I said, it was funny, it was witty, it was relatable, and I absolutely love this one. I think that this is a great summer read right in the middle of wedding season, especially if you're going to be attending a bunch of weddings this summer. This would be a fantastic book to read. In addition, it takes place in the UK, and so that, you know, adds another atmosphere element to it. And so yeah, this one got 4.5 stars for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Next, I listened to an audiobook, and I listened to The Book Wanderers by Anna James. This is a middle grade book. This I listened to complete Chantel at Chantel Reads All Day's Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. The challenge for June was to read a book with a book on the cover, and this one worked. It has a couple of different books on the cover, but this is about a girl, Tilly, who comes from a magical family, but she doesn't quite know that yet. All of it, her grandparents own a bookshop, and one day when she's in the bookshop, she starts encountering different characters from books. But she doesn't realize that's who they are. She just notices that they're different, and then they'll disappear. And so she becomes curious, and she starts talking to one of her friends about it, and they kind of start digging into it. And lo and behold, her family holds this ability to book wander, or to wander inside of books. And there's rules and regulations that go with this, and so you get to learn all about this. And this is the first book in a series, and so it's definitely a lot of world building takes place in this specific book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I enjoyed the friendships that were in here, as well as the references to classic literature. There are references to Alice in Wonderland, A Little Princess, Anne of Green Gables, Pride and Prejudice, Sherlock Holmes. And so a lot of classic literature is explored in this, but you don't have to have read those books to understand and connect with this book, and I really appreciated that as well. This is a fantastic book, especially if you have kids that really love classic literature. I think this would be a great book for them, or if you read a lot of like juvenile classics with your kids, I think this would be great. And so yeah, I am excited to continue this series. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I've heard a lot of the great things about it up until this point, so I'm glad that I finally was able to read it and check it off the list. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Next, I listened to a novella. This is Inheritance by Katharine McGee, and it is a prequel novella to the American Royals series. The American Royals series is an alternate history book, but it's set modern day. So it's a contemporary book, but it's as if the US would have become a monarchy instead of a democracy when we won the Revolutionary War. And so it is current day, following the college age children of the King and Queen of America. And so that's the first book, and we follow specifically 4 different girls in the book. You get 4 different points of view, and all of them are very different and very unique. You get to hear from the oldest daughter, who will become queen when her father passes away. You also get to hear from her younger sister, who is a twin, and then her brother's girlfriend and her sister's best friend. So you get to kind of hear from a variety of different people as they are related to the royal family, as well as people within the royal family. It's a very interesting take on what could have happened. And so this specific book, Inheritance, is a prequel novella to that book, and it just talks about kind of what happened right before the first book started. It was a very short audiobook, like 2.5 hours, and it was enjoyable. It was 3 stars for me. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. It wasn't anything I'm gonna write home about, but it was enjoyable, and I did enjoy my time listening to it. I have really enjoyed my time listening to both American Royals and the sequel Majesty, and so yeah, really enjoyed them. I will say the first book is by far the best. I feel like it's kind of tapered from there, but they're still kind of guilty pleasure fun reads, kind of in the vein of The Selection without the action aspect that you will get in The Selection. So if you like The Selection, you're probably going to like the American Royal series. It is a YA series, and so yeah. But Inheritance got 3 stars for me. After that, I finished my first physical book of the month, and I finished Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer. I read this with Krista from Books and Jams, as well as one of our subscribers, Lindsay, and we, like I said, read all of this together, and then we are currently watching through the TV show. This is a book that explores religious zealots, and specifically violent religious zealots. It was written in 2003, so right after or soon after the attacks during 9/11. And the purpose of this book was to explore the fact that other religions have violent extremists, not just the Muslim religion. And I really appreciated this. This book specifically focuses on the Mormon religion, specifically fundamentalist Mormons. And so it really hones in on a specific case in the 1980s where 2 fundamentalist Mormon men killed their sister-in-law and baby toddler niece. And so you get specific details about that crime, as well as a history of the Mormon Church. And the author really explores in depth the foundation of the Mormon Church, going back to Joseph Smith and finding the golden tablets and what their religion is based on. But then it also explores some of the violent episodes that have occurred within the Mormon Church and their history, and just kind of delves into that a little bit, all while being very respectful, I feel like, of the Mormon religion. He is in no way saying that all Mormons are bad. He's just saying that there is a history of violence within the Mormon Church, just like there is within the Christian Church. No religion is exempt from a violent history. And so I really, really thought that the exploration of the Mormon faith in this book was very, very interesting. But then also getting to hear about the specific 1980s crime and what that family believed, and how the Mormon Church, when it divided into the mainstream Mormon Church and the fundamentalist Mormon Church, how that kind of cultivated a society where crime and abuse and violence really took off within that fundamentalist sect. Not all of them, not everybody, but it cultivated that environment where that was able to kind of blossom. And it was a very, very interesting book. I will say it was a bit long. There were a few chapters that droned on quite a bit, and there was a lot of repetitiveness. There we go. In it. And so for that reason it got 4 stars, but I learned a ton, and it definitely piqued my interest to want to look into specific other things within the Mormon faith. And the author does say in his author's note at the end that he grew up around the Mormon faith and has a great respect for the Mormon religion. And so I thought that this was so well done, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that was my take on Under the Banner of Heaven. It was really good. Okay, next I listened to another contemporary romance. This one was Made in Manhattan. This is by Lauren Lane. Sorry, I'm looking down because I have my list down here. And this one is about Violet, who is the kind of adoptive surrogate granddaughter of a very wealthy CEO in Manhattan. And her adoptive grandmother finds out that she has a long lost grandson from New Orleans, and she brings him up and wants to kind of groom him to be the next CEO. However, he's from New Orleans, he's from the South, he is not a Manhattanite. He doesn't understand the ways of being a successful CEO in Manhattan. And so it's kind of a My Fair Lady take on this type of story, like in reverse. So Violet is tasked with kind of revamping his style and giving him kind of etiquette classes and teaching him how to be successful in Manhattan. All the while a romance ensues. This, again, was not a favorite of mine. I felt like the writing was lacking a little bit in this one. It was fairly simplistic. I did appreciate the story. I thought the story in parts was very humorous and very fun, but overall it was just okay. It was a fairly forgettable book for me, and so I gave this one 2.5 stars. It was just okay, but like I said, if you're into My Fair Lady stories, Pygmalion style stories, then this might be one that works really well for you. I know, a lot of people like those types of stories. For me, it was just okay. All right, next I read a graphic novel. This was a graphic novel that I received from NetGalley, and this is The Neverlanders. This is a first in a new YA graphic novel series that is a new take on Peter Pan. This is by Tom Taylor and John Samariva. I think I said that right. But yeah, like I said, new take on Peter Pan. We start in an inner city. I don't know if it's New York or where it's at, but in an inner city with these kids that are living at a dump. They kind of have created their own family, and then they meet a new guy who takes them to Neverland. And they get to meet the fairies and the magical creatures, and they are fighting against a pirate. And this is a bit of a flip flop. There are some twists along the way. One of the things that I found really fun with this graphic novel is that when they get to Neverland, they each get to adopt a suit that will be kind of their persona. And so it's very Big Hero 6 esque, if you're familiar with that Disney movie, where everybody gets a suit and that kind of is their persona for their adventures. And so there's a ladybug, there's a lizard or a gecko, there's different characters. I don't know how else to explain it, but that was really fun. The fairy in this, Tink, swears a lot, but it's like all bleeped out. It's very weird. I kind of wish that she wasn't like that, but you know what? That's my own personal preference. This was a fun one. I don't know if I'm going to continue with the series or not. It didn't make a huge impression on me, but it was a lot of fun. Like I said, definitely vibes of Big Hero 6 in it. And I definitely enjoyed the twists that were in it from the original Peter Pan story. And so, yeah, this one got 3 stars for me. And then after that, I listened to another YA book. This is Flirting with Fate by J.C. Cervantes. This is a Hispanic kind of romance-ish book. It definitely has Encanto vibes. So it follows our main character, Ava, who is supposed to get a blessing from her grandmother. Her family has this history of being able to give blessings along the female line, but they can only be given on your deathbed. And so they cannot be received unless it is given on your deathbed. And so her grandmother is not in great health. She knows that she's kind of got to be on call to receive her blessing. And then one day she gets the call, and on her way to receive the blessing, she gets in a car accident and doesn't make it there in time. Well, lo and behold, after her grandmother passes, she starts receiving visits from her grandmother as well as a saint. And she gets these visits and realizes that her grandmother did give the blessing. However, it didn't make it to her, it made it to somebody else. And so they have to find the blessing and retrieve the blessing from that person. And so this definitely, like I said, has Encanto vibes, just because of the blessing, and they really treasure this blessing. Her sisters both got a blessing, and so she is able to talk with them about it. And the close knitness of the Hispanic family is definitely something that is prevalent in this book. But then on top of that, this also gave me Drop Dead Diva vibes. I don't know if you remember that show, I think it was on cable years ago, but because her grandmother and this saint, the ghosts, just randomly will pop up and start talking to her in different places, it definitely gave me those vibes of being like surrounded by ghosts and other people not being able to see them, and you having to kind of carry on like they're not really there all the while they're like trying to talk to you. So that was really fun. This one, once again, was not a favorite of mine, but I think it's just because I probably was not the target audience for this one. This is one that I got on NetGalley as well. And so it just, for me, was okay. Like I said, she has to try to find this blessing. The person they finally end up figuring out who got the blessing, she is trying to befriend, and then she starts feeling guilty because she feels like she's tricking him. And so there's a lot of that kind of angst going into it as well. And so, yeah, this one ended up getting 3 stars for me. It was enjoyable, but not memorable. We'll say that. After that, I finally finished Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. You guys, it took me forever to finish this book. Not because it was bad. I gave it 4.5 stars. I just am not great at sitting down and physically reading a book. And this is one that I knew I wanted to physically read. This is a historical book that follows, what is her name? Elizabeth Zott, who is a chemist. She really wants to be a chemist, and she really loves science, and she holds a lot of value in her ability to be a scientist. However, this takes place in the 1950s when women could not have careers like that. They weren't seen as being capable of being scientists and being taken seriously in their own on their own merit. And so she just wants to be a scientist. She gets a job at a lab and ends up falling in love with a very prestigious, wow, that was hard, prestigious scientist who loves her for her and isn't trying to change her. And then tragedy happens, and she ends up being left alone, pregnant, and she is raising a child now. She's a mom. So as you can imagine, in the 1950s, you couldn't have a career and be a mom, especially a single mom. You were not looked at with a lot of respect if that were to be the case. And so she is trying to figure out how to reconcile wanting to be a scientist while also being a single mother and raising her child to really think for herself and embrace a lot of feminist values. And so throughout the series, throughout the book, she ends up being tapped to start a cooking show on a public television station. And so she starts this cooking show because cooking is chemistry, and her only demand is that she's not going to pander to what the studio wants her to make this cooking show to be. She is going to make it a science lesson, and she is going to treat the women in the audience as if they are capable of understanding complicated things. And she does that, and she receives a lot of praise for it, and women who really admire her and really are able to step out of their comfort zone and embrace being successful and being smart and not looked at as just being the sidekick to the man. And I loved the feminism that was in this. I felt like was just enough to where it wasn't super disrespectful to all men, because there are men in this that are good. I feel like sometimes in feminist books, you can run that really fine line of being to where you feel like all men are bad, and all men are not bad. Yes, there are a lot of bad men in the world who don't respect women, but not all men feel that way. And I felt like this book did a good job of showing, especially in the 1950s, how hard it was to be a woman in the sciences, while also showing that there are good men who are willing to help you succeed and willing to support you instead of you support them. And so I really, really appreciated that in this book. The humor, the writing style was very different. One of the things, especially at the beginning of the book, is the writing style and the timeline started off kind of as an accordion, where you would start in one time and then you would have a flashback, and then within that flashback you would have another flashback, and within that flashback you would have another flashback, and then it would work its way back up again. And I found that to be very unique. There was a lot. It probably won't work for everybody, but for me, I really enjoyed the writing style and kind of the bebopping all over within the timeline. You're getting lots of different flashbacks and lots of different perspectives. One of the perspectives is of a dog, and that I felt like was one of the best perspectives because it was so objective and you could really kind of understand what was going on from an outsider's point of view. And I loved the dog in this book, and I am not one who particularly loves when stories are told from the point of view of an animal. And so I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This got 4.5 stars for me. I highly recommend it. And yeah. All right. Next, I listened to another YA book. This is book 3 in the American Royal series. This is Rivals by Catherine McGee. And just like Inheritance, and I already explained kind of the premise of the series as a whole, Rivals is the next book in the series. For me, it was good. Like I said, it was enjoyable, but it doesn't hold a candle to the first one. It was still enjoyable. I'm enjoying seeing how the different storylines are evolving. I will say one of the storylines within this specific book I had figured out really, really early on. It was not a surprise at all. But then there were other storylines that kind of caught me off guard. And so there's definitely some unlikable characters in this series. So that's definitely something to take into consideration, as well as, like I said, it being a YA book. These kids are in their 20s. I say kids, but these characters are in their 20s. And so there are some behaviors that I might roll my eyes at a little bit, but overall, it was still an enjoyable book, and I gave it 3.5 stars. And then the last book that I read in June, I posted a reading vlog for this book, and that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I wanted to do a reading vlog to read this for the first time because I had never been spoiled for it. I didn't really know what it was about, and I knew a lot of people really liked it, and so I read it. I read this one physically, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time. It kept me entertained. However, I will say I was slightly disappointed by the end. I felt like the ending I feel like you're going to either love it or you're going to hate it. And I just kind of fell in the mediocre realm of the ending. I wasn't a huge fan, but I didn't hate it. So the vague premise of this book is that this is about Nick Dunn, who one day his wife goes missing. And it just kind of goes from there. You get her diary entries, and you get to kind of know who she was, and you get to his perspective, and there are lots of twists and turns and lots of secrets, and it all kind of comes to fruition in the end. And I feel like that's all you really need to know going into it. I didn't even know that. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It's definitely a psychological thriller. It is not, there's a couple of scenes that can get a little bit gory, but nothing too severe. It's nothing too freaky or anything like that, or scary, but it is definitely psychological. It'll kind of mess with you. I definitely, throughout this book, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what's going on. And so I ended up giving this one 4 stars because I did feel like the author did a good job of keeping me going and keeping me guessing and keeping me confused. And so for that reason, this one got 4 stars, and I did enjoy my time with it. This is probably one of the more successful psychological thrillers that I have read. And so, yeah, I'm still trying to decide if I want to try more Gillian Flynn. We shall see. But anyway, that was the last book that I read in June. So if you have read any of these books, I would love to hear your comments about them down below in the comment section, and let me know what you think about them. They will all also be linked down below. And that's going to do it for today. Let me know what some of your favorite books that you read in June were as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And until next time, see ya.